You made a comment on a post in my Art of Entrepreneurship Facebook group last week, Yael, where we were talking about solutions and your unique solution. And you came back and said something with a little bit of conflict around the word unique. Can you tell us
Sure.
what that was?
Sure. I guess the part that what it brought up for me is that it's hard for me to fathom that whatever solution comes up in my head to whatever problem I'm looking at, as the solution comes to my head, it's hard for me to think that nobody else has thought of this before. So I guess it's, I can't imagine that would make me the smartest person in the world at that particular moment. And I can't imagine that would be the case. So.
Okay, now we get to the crux of it.
Right. So I guess that's the part that, like I said, for that particular moment, if that's the problem that I'm looking at, whether it's to help somebody in whatever they're going through, or whether I'm thinking about world hunger or whatever, I can't imagine that the solution has only come to me and nobody else before me has ever thought of this. So that makes me think of somebody else must have thought of it, and maybe something in this plan of mine or whatever isn't going to work, and that I guess that's where I end up doubting myself now that I think about it.
Because it couldn't possibly be you that came up with a solution to the problem in this
Right,
moment.
Exactly. So.
Why not you?
Well, I guess that would qualify more for like the big things, like world hunger, or poverty or stuff like that, as opposed to helping one person in particular. Helping one person in particular, okay, they didn't think of it. I get that, because they're still focused. They've been focused on the problem. So they couldn't think of the solution. So I get it. Of course, now I'm saying this as, let's bring in the law of attraction here. I'm attracting the, the download of the solution or whatever, as, a friend of mine calls them downloads.
Right, sure.
So I'm attracting that. And if my client has been at a lower vibration and has not been able to, they haven't been able to grab that thought, that idea yet.
Right.
So that I get. So on a one-on-one thing, I get that. So I don't necessarily think unique, because then I'm like, another coach probably could have helped you too, but but I'm glad that I get to be the one to help you through this. I'm honored to be the one that gets to help you through this.
That makes me think of a couple of things. First of all, it makes me think of, for whatever reason, Greta Thunberg. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, that's the young one that was like last year or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Who made a worldwide splash with regards to climate change and it being an issue that we all needed to pay attention to. And it all began with a simple cardboard sign sitting outside, I think, the Swedish embassy. Forgive me for not knowing all the details, but
I wouldn't know if you were wrong. So,
but she just had a sign, and she sat outside and kind of did a strike, if you will, a strike of one person, saying, we need to change this. We can't let this continue to be the way it is.
Right.
And she didn't let that be the end of her thought and her it was picked up by the media and then spread throughout the world.
Right.
And then the next thing we know, we're seeing her face on many different magazine covers and so forth.
Right. And she presented in front of the Congress, or I don't know, a bunch of important people.
Right. So, here's this one person. She's 15, 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And she makes a world splash.
Mm-hmm.
Is she unique in her concern about climate change? Not at all. I mean, there are millions of people, if not billions of people, who are concerned about world climate change. Mm-hmm. But is she unique in other ways?
I guess in the sense, like I said, there's no way that she's not the only person that feels that way. Her uniqueness stems from the fact that she has the guts to get out there and actually voice her opinion unapologetically in front of everyone who needs to hear it. Whether that be the people who also feel that way, knowing that they're not alone and knowing that there are other people who this means a lot to, and also in front of people who can do something about it.
Right. So it wasn't so much the unique in the idea or the realization of the problem. It was unique in the manner in which
courage.
Yeah, the way that she used her courage and presented expressed her voice.
Right.
And me in etymology, I looked up the word unique to see what the root of it was.
Okay.
And the root of it, you'll notice UN
mm-hmm.
is similar to like Spanish uno, right?
Right.
Meaning
single.
One.
Right.
So it is the one. She is the one person who did what she did.
Mm-hmm.
In the situations you're talking about with a solution, with helping a client through a problem, you're the one person, maybe not with a unique idea of how to solve the problem, but you're the unique person who is sitting in front in that.
Right. I have the relationship with that client.
Right.
Where they hopefully are in a position now to receive the answer.
Absolutely. And I think there are many ways that we can be unique. I think one of the things that gives me a different perspective on unique is just knowing that by just having a handful of variables, mm-hmm. you can get to a very high number. Mm-hmm. Without changing too many things. So in finding our unique solution, finding our unique message, we don't have to be dramatically different from the rest of the world. We just have to have a different way of either thinking or presenting or connecting with our community. Mm-hmm. Like, this podcast that we're doing, there are millions of other podcasts out there, but we're unique in that you and I are the only ones doing this podcast.
True.
We might not be the only ones talking about story, but we might be the only ones talking about story in the way that we're talking about story.
In this context, right? Yeah. That makes me think of this is a weird link here. That makes me think of my kids. My ex-husband, standing joke that I've been saying for years is that I know that one of my kids, at least one of my kids, I have 2 biological kids, at least one of my kids is destined to do something like, I don't know, cure cancer or, they find the cure for the common cold or something, I don't know, or whatever, something huge. Because that is the only reason that God would have kept me and John together as long as he did, was to have those children. Because if they were different kids, it wouldn't be the same kid.
Absolutely.
So that's what that brings me back to. So, okay, that's the unique
Okay.
part of it, I guess.
Well, I think about the same with my 4 kids, and all 4 kids have the same parents. All 4 of them were raised largely in the same environment.
Right.
And all 4 kids are so different from one another.
Right. And they all have their own personalities.
Absolutely. Their own personalities, their own perspectives, their own
right.
way of expressing themselves.
That's a good point.
When I was thinking about this idea of talking about unique today, I was thinking about, just us as individuals and just like physically that, somewhere in the world, there's some, what do they call it, a doppelganger who looks like me.
Yeah.
Or someone who looks like you.
Yeah. I've heard it before already, actually. I've had people come up to me and say, "Hey, I saw your doppelganger yesterday." So I've had a couple of people tell me that. Maybe I have one of those faces or something. I don't know.
Many years ago, when I had just graduated from college and took a job at the Gap, I had people at work calling me George, and I'm like, "What the heck are you calling me George for?"
Right.
And the joke is that I reminded them of George Costanza from Seinfeld.
Did you ever punch anybody for that? I would have.
I didn't. And to be honest, I
hate that character. That character just always annoyed me.
I hardly ever watched Seinfeld, so I've watched a whole lot more of comedians in cars getting coffee than I ever watched.
That is such a silly show. I only saw it recently.
Which, comedians in cars?
Yeah, I never heard of it before. Ken put it on one day. I was like, what the hell? The concept just is hilarious, I think.
It is unique.
Yes, it is unique. That's true. That's a good point.
Especially with Jerry Seinfeld in the driver's seat and whatever comedian he
Gilbert Gottfried, yeah.
Right. One time he was actually on with Barack Obama. Another time he's had Steve Martin on. He's had numerous guests on.
I think I saw Steve Martin. I think I saw the one with Steve Martin.
Did you see Steve Martin? I've almost always really enjoyed Steve Martin's sense of humor.
He's like slapstick comedy, I think.
Yes. Just, yeah, different. So with this idea of unique, what's on the other side of the mountain, if you will? What's on the other side of the conflict? What is, when we don't feel unique, what does that prevent us from doing? Or what does it enable us to do?
I think for myself, like I said, I would, at times that would like throw me down a rabbit hole where if I think that someone else must have come up with this before, then my next thought from there is if someone else thought of this before, then maybe they didn't follow through with it. Problem has not been solved because they didn't follow through with it because they found a hole in this idea. In which case, then I don't follow through because I figure somebody else must have thought of it, and there's something I'm not thinking of. There's some part of this, there's some little piece of the puzzle that I'm not considering that it won't work anyway, so I don't follow through with it. Okay. Does that make sense?
Oh, it definitely makes sense, yes.
Okay.
That because you weren't the original conceiver of the idea, the solution.
Right. Yeah.
The original conceiver, because it hasn't spread throughout the world. Right.
Like I said, that would make me at that particular moment, that would make me the smartest person in the world. And that's the part where I'm just like, there's no way that I'm the smartest person in the world. At that particular moment, it would feel like that. And there's no way that I am absolutely the smartest person in the world and that I came up with this and nobody else before me has ever come up with this. So somebody else must have somebody else who's smarter than me must have, and they must have seen something that I'm not seeing. Like I said, it's a whole rabbit hole. It's a whole rabbit hole thing. There's a whole, and there's just deep dive in that.
So the part that I find interesting is that there's always someone else who...
always someone better than me. There's always someone better than me, or smarter than me, or prettier than me, or just better in some way or another.
I wonder how often I can relate to that. Although, honestly, if my ego and my academic background, where I was usually maybe not at the top of the class, but I was always in the top percentile,
right,
of the class. I probably struggle more with, I am the smartest person in the world. Than
You're on the other end.
Right. And the challenge that I come up with that is that I don't produce, don't share, the solution, the ideas, the content, whatever, because if I share it and then it turns out that I'm not the smartest person in the world, then I get, my platform chopped out from underneath me.
Oh, right? Yeah.
That there's always this risk of, either someone out there is smarter than I am and they're going to prove that they're smarter than I am, and they missed something that I'm not seeing right now.
Yeah.
Honestly, I see that being the same situation regardless of which side of the spectrum you're on.
Yeah.
That someone's going to knock you down from your pedestal, if you will.
Well, I guess on the same note, though, I used to be the person that would be like, nowadays I recognize, there's always someone better than me, but I guess in my personal journey, I've learned to look at, I have it so much better than so many other people. And while that in itself makes me so grateful for where I am now. And I aspire to be even higher. Again, bring the law of attraction back into it. I always kind of picture it like vibing high. Like, I used to, like, where your vibration level is, like, I used to vibe at like this, at like this level. Nowadays I'm vibing a lot higher, and I aspire to vibe even higher. Sure. As I learn more, as I, just keep going down this journey. So I guess that's where those are my aspirations.
Sure. So that's kind of the, if you will, the resolution that, that we continually turn up the light, if you will.
Yeah. It's a good way to put it. I like it.
And where I've grappled with and am starting to accept is, maybe I do get knocked down, or maybe there is a better answer out there. But if I don't share where I'm at on the journey, then we don't have that opportunity to have that discussion, right? We don't have that opportunity to test it out.
Well, I think that's where, I think for myself, connection right now is what I'm what I'm going for, I guess you'd say. I think the value that I have found in story is the connection that we make with the person that we're sharing the story with, whether we're sharing our story or they're sharing theirs, whatever the case is, somebody's vibing higher than the other person. So if I'm, as a coach, my job is to help pull you up. I want to bring you up a little higher. So I guess in using your mountain metaphor, that would be, I'm standing a little higher up the mountain and I want to pull you up to my level.
Sure.
As I'm still climbing myself.
Sure.
I've still got more to go, but
And
I want to pull you up to my level.
the thought that I have with regards to that is, sometimes you're pulling the person behind up the mountain with you. And sometimes you're actually behind the person and pushing them up,
True.
I think of like an Olympic coach, who's, coaching the gymnast or something.
Right.
They're not out there doing the gymnastics on the mat or on the bars or whatever. But
I guess, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to throw this in there. Is I guess that the part for that, those would be the stories where I would say, I wish I would have.
Mm-hmm.
Where I would tell them, those are the stories that I would reflect on, and I would share the story, and here's what I did, and here are the results that I got. I wish I would have done this instead. Hopefully to inspire them to do, more than, so I guess that would be the analogy of like pushing them up the mountain.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that. I don't remember who said it. It was Aristotle or somebody else, but Greek philosopher made the point that there are two types of stories, right? There are the tragedies and there are the comedies. And the way that I have reframed that is that there are the tragedies and the triumphant stories, right?
Okay.
And I can see that the tragic stories, the value in them is, if I had known better, and I tell these stories to my kids all the time, learn from my mistakes so that you don't do the same dumb things that I did when I was your age.
I remember my dad telling me, I remember a big fight that we got into. I was a teenager. I was a very mouthy teenager. And I remember a fight that my dad and I got into, and he said, I want you to learn from my mistakes. And I remember telling him, let me make my own mistakes. Because I don't know, I was in trouble for doing something or another, and he was telling me, not to, or, to do something else or whatever.
Right.
And I said, you got to let me make my own mistakes. And it occurs to me, as a teenager, I knew this.
Yeah. And I think that's important too. There's always the freedom, the liberty, if you will, of the individual to make their own choices as to how they're going to respond.
Right. Right.
And I was even more set that I had all the right answers when I was a teenager than I am now.
Yeah, I was more convinced back then.
Yeah, I've bumped my shins a few too many times to realize that I don't have all the answers. But I think there's still value in as parents, as coaches, as leaders, as content creators, that we share the story, and those who are in a place of receiving those stories can receive the value of those stories. And sometimes, they might pull us up a little bit. They might say, did you think about this?
My clients, I thank them all the time, because they do, because during our interactions, like I'll hear myself offering them advice, and then I wind up taking my own advice. Because I'm listening to what I'm telling them, and I'm thinking about it. Why aren't I doing this?
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
well, that's honestly one of the reasons I write as much as I write, is because, it's an opportunity for me to have my words right in front of my face, and just to realize, what, I should not just be writing about this. I should be doing this. I should be.
I can give you an example of that, actually. Can I give you an example of that?
Sure, of course.
I did this, hold on. For one of my clients, I suggested that she start this. It's called a feel-good notebook. Okay, so on the last page, or at the end of the notebook, I told her to write, it's look what I created. Look what I did. And on here, we put everything that I've done, I've accomplished. Like everything that I've asked for and I've accomplished and I've received in my life. I created this, I manifested this.
Sure. Yep. So
these would be what I call prouds. Like this would not have happened unless I was not involved.
Right.
You know, whether it's something for myself or, something that, I helped someone else or whatever the case is. So it's look what I manifested. Started on the last page. And then, when you run out of room, that one you're working your way backwards. Page 1 is on the last page. Page 2 is on the page previous. Okay. The reason we do that is because in the beginning, we're writing on its way. So this is what I'm working towards. For example, this particular client is looking for a new job. So, and I told her, I said, well, you want a job because she wants to eventually start her own business, but she needs a job to pay her bills, her current bills. So, so I said, so you don't necessarily want a job, you need an income. So I don't want you to put on here a job. I want you to put income on here. And, why do you need income? So that I can do what I want to do with my time. If I didn't have to worry about money, I'd be able to, follow my passions. Sure. So, and those would be what you'd write under the front part of the notebook where it's on its way. So with all that, and this notebook is dedicated just to this. And then I said, so essentially, the point is that we are writing your life story. And it occurred to me that that's what I'm doing, is I'm writing my life story. Nice. In this book. So the point to that whole exercise is I want my client to recognize her own power in her own life. Because as you and I have talked before, the first time you tell a story, it's from the place of a victim. Well, that's what holds us back, is that which stories are you still the victim in? Right. And if you are the victim, those are the stories that we will talk about during our sessions. Sure. And I want you to own your part of it and figure out you're not the victim here. You're allowed to be mad at whoever you need to be mad at. You're allowed to, I want you to own your feelings, own the story. This is your story. What are we going to take out of that story? Sure. How can we put that story into this book?
I'm curious where you got that exercise from.
It was a download.
So it
was one of those things. I was talking to my client and I came up with the idea for the notebook, and then that whole turning it into the life story, that just kind of came running out of my mouth. And as I was saying it, I was like, and then I started it. As soon as I hung up with her, I started it for myself. So I'm like, why have I not done this before?
So to go back to the beginning of our conversation today, could that be a unique solution?
Okay. Well, see, that part, to me, this falls under there's a product out there called a life book. Have you heard of it?
I've not.
Okay. So I guess it's a journal thing. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. I guess it's journal prompts. And I suspect it's a similar concept or something. Maybe it's a take on that.
Sure. So it's similar, and that's right. Great.
Yeah.
One of the things I was talking, I don't think I ever got to this point earlier, but you and I are pretty similar. We've got
Right.
2 eyes and a mouth and nose and 2 ears.
Yeah.
I still have a little bit of hair on my head, and you have a lot more. If you lined up all the whatever approaching 8 billion people on the earth, there'd be a lot of similarities between every single one of them.
Right.
Yet each one of them would be unique. So, your unique solution doesn't have to be, a Martian on the earth. It doesn't have to be some
Right.
incredibly different solution. All it has to be is just a little bit different than the one that it is, that's already out there.
I can honestly say, even in just having this one conversation, I really appreciate this conversation, because I can see the point, and I can see where my perspective came from, where my old perspective came from, and I can see, I guess you can say, I can see my uniqueness now. So thank you.
Oh.
So thank you. I appreciate this little therapy session today.
You're welcome. I think that's our conversations often turn into that. But
yes, they do. One way or the other, yeah.
Yeah. And I need to bring this conversation to a close.
Okay.
Thank you for your participation today, Yael, and bringing your unique solution to our conversation.
I want to add one part to this. The fact that I think this was a perfect conversation to have in our recording here, in our podcast, because this shows exactly what we were trying to show as far as how a story transforms. Like, the reason I don't feel, the reason that I wasn't feeling unique is because I was always, I was taught to be humble. I was always taught, you don't want to get too cocky, all that. So I remember, as a kid, that's just what I was taught, culturally,
Oh, definitely. I think most of us were, so.
Exactly. So I think it's important that, I think this has been a great episode, because it shows the transformation of how talking about a story, just talking it through with the right person and just gaining another perspective transforms the story.
Sure.
So funny how we did it in one session.
Nice. Well, excellent.
Okay. All right.
Okay. I've got another call, which is
okay.
Go, but
okay.
Thank you, Yael, and
thank you. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely.